Hey, what's happening everybody? My name is Hayden Adams with A Designer Who Codes. In this video, I'm going to take you through how to build a basic web portfolio from scratch. I'm going to start with the home page where it's all responsive. We'll make a navigation go from normal to responsive design. We'll make this picture get bigger and smaller depending upon what size of browser you're using. We'll also focus on About page where you're going to put a picture and a paragraph of text next to it. We'll then build a portfolio whereby you have 3 pictures and you click on one picture and you go in to the actual picture. And then we'll actually have a contact form where we'll build it where you can submit information. And I have one example right here where I did build it. Yes, I did joke. This works. I don't know. It actually did. And I submitted this information today and we'll show you how you can put your website up online for free. And we'll also showcase the power of Bootstrap in this project. So with that, let's get started. All right, welcome back. So before we start, I want to go through the software that I'm going to use primarily to build, I'm going to use the software through the entirety of this build. I'm using Visual Studio Code. You can find that by going to code.visualstudio.com or doing a quick Google search for it. If you are a Mac person, don't worry, it is a product by Microsoft, but it's one of the better products by Microsoft. It also runs in Windows because it is a Microsoft product. Also runs in Linux if you are watching this and building on a Linux computer. And of course, I'm on a Macintosh, so I can download it for version 10.10 plus. I'm currently running, let's see what I got here, version 1.48.2. So just FYI, I am using this free piece of coding software. It's one of the best tools out there I can possibly find. So I'm going to use this tool throughout the entirety of this video. So let's go ahead and open up the software. If you need to pause the video to download it, go ahead. I'm going to create a new file. And the great part about Visual Studio Code is it doesn't give you the option of what file it is. It knows what file it will be based upon the extension I'm going to give it. So I'm going to save this first file. I'm going to create a folder called Portfolio Website, and I'm going to say index.html. Index.html has been the first name of any web page since the internet really began, and it hasn't really changed even to this day. So the first page is going to be index.html. So let's go ahead and write some code. I'm going to say less than sign, and the software already says you probably want doc type. And I do, doc type HTML. This is just a declaration to say, hey, this is code coming up, so be aware, browser. And it's more about HTML5 declaration. I'm then going to say HTML, if I could type the code successfully, less than sign HTML, and close it up. This is where everything's going to live and breathe. From here, what I'm going to do is say head and make room at the head, and then type less than sign body. All my metadata, or the information behind the scenes, is going to live in the head section, and everything that's actually going to be seen inside the browser goes inside the body. From here, I'm going to do is I'm going to give it a title. So I'm going to say is, I'll say title, and this, my page, is going to say the work of Jacob Smith. We're going to use Jacob Smith as our web portfolio web designer today. And I'm just going to say in here, test. That's all I want to do. So the next thing I want to do is I want to test this and see where these 2 pieces of text go. So if I come over to my portfolio website and say index.html and double click on it, you can be in Safari, you can be in Chrome. It doesn't matter what browser that we work in. But all I'm looking for is it's going to say the work of Jacob Smith and test. To me, that shows that my head section and my title is working properly and the body is set up properly. Whenever I write code, I don't want to go too far before I stop and just look at it in a browser. But this tells me that the basic structure of my code is done properly. So I have the basics of my HTML all set to go. What I next want to do is I want to bring in what is called get bootstrap or bootstrap. So if I type in get bootstrap, I'm going to find this is the build fast responsive sites with Bootstrap. Bootstrap makes my life so much easier because it helps me build responsive websites. So what I want to do is I want to bring in the information that Bootstrap needs to work. If I head over to documentation, I'm going to copy and paste some information. The first thing I want to do is inside the documentation, I want to go over to the CSS and copy paste the style sheet into your head before all style sheets to load in CSS. I'm going to copy this, and inside my head, after the title, I'm going to paste this link rel style sheet. Now, that's the first thing of these two pieces I have to do to bring in get Bootstrap. I'm going to save it just so I lock it in. I'm going to come back, and down here we often have to bring in the JavaScript. I'm going to copy this and right inside the body. So if you look at it, what it's going to say is right before the closing body tag. So there's always, mostly, there's open and close tags. The open tag is where it says head, and the close tag is the slash and the same word. So the body and the close body, I want to put the JavaScript right here. Now I do want to line things up. So if you notice, script right here lined up fine, but these didn't. So I'm just going to tab in these little guys just to the right. Inside Visual Studio Code, I'm using command right bracket in order to move things left and right. The command right bracket goes to the right, and the command left bracket goes to the left. For me, it just helps to see things and where things are going if they're lined up or indented properly. The great part about this is that once you bring it in once, that's it. That's all you have to do. You have to worry about bringing in more times than once. I'm going to save this, and what I want to check inside of Safari, and I closed my screen I thought I had open, is what you should see was the word test change from a serif with margins to a sans serif, and it tucked in the top left. I'll show you the before and after. If I hide this for 1 second and I refresh, this is how the test should look without Bootstrap. And if I uncomment or command slash to comment or uncomment inside of VS Code, and I refresh, now you can see that test shows up in sans serif and doesn't have any margins going on. We're going to come back and forth to Bootstrap, so if you want to keep it open, you're welcome to, but I'll walk you through all different pieces as well. It just helps to come in documentation, copy and paste versus typing things in from scratch. In fact, it gives you literally a button to click and a button to click. These two pieces of code will be on every single page that we design. But again, once you put it in once, you don't have to worry about it a second time. But that's how you can implement Bootstrap into your project. Bootstrap only takes us so far. There's a lot of things Bootstrap does, but for anything else, I want to create a custom CSS file. I'm going to Command N on the Macintosh, and I'm going to save a new file and call it custom.css. And I'm going to save it like that. What I'm going to do is I'm going to link my custom CSS to my index.html. Now, what I'm going to do is right below this style sheet, I'm going to type > link rel and say style sheet. Should come up for me. And I just want to link the style sheet. href equals quotes. Now what it'll do for me is it's going to look for the CSS file. And I'm going to say custom.css. I'm going to close the CSS link. The great way of knowing if this works or not is by giving it a test again to see if it works. Over in custom CSS, I want to write the phrase body. This will affect the whole entire body. If you notice, we wrote body as the biggest tags. Oops, don't click on MDN reference. Stop. No, I don't want to go away. All right, so if you look at the body, I want to reference that in CSS. So I can type the word body. And then I'm going to type in space, curly brackets, and say background color. And just give it a ginormous color of purple. If this works, we know the CSS file is connected to the HTML document. So I'm going to come over to Safari and then refresh my screen and see that it works. If it doesn't show purple, whereby if I type something wrong, or let's say I forgot a dash and I just said background color, this will not work. So any piece that you have, I like to stop pretty quickly, assess to make sure purple. I could choose green. I can choose whatever color I want. And what it's going to do is it's just going to say, make this entire section be green. This is just a test, and I can take it out because once I know it works, I'm not going to use that actual code, but it gives me as a fail-safe to say, hey, this is what works because I know it's connected right here. What's also important to note is the custom CSS goes after the Bootstrap. If you think of CSS, because it's essentially a style sheet or cascading, that's the magic of the word. The letter C stands for cascading style sheet. It means that Bootstrap will do all the work up front, but if you want to stylize it or make it custom, then I can make a custom CSS to add my own stylization on top of Bootstrap. And so it's really important that we made the custom file after the Bootstrap section. Cool. We have our custom CSS file all set to go. The next thing I want to do is start working on the head or the header section of my page. I want to start top down on the design. What I'm going to do is in my HTML, where it says test, I'm going to say header. Did I do something? Oh, I just put the word test in there. I always forget when I double click to select, it keeps the text. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say header class container. Now the container is very unique. Let's put the word test back in for a second. So the header is a tag that identifies the header section of the website, which is going to be the top part of the website. And the class container is a very unique property. So if I refresh, note how the word test moved over to the right-hand side. Also, we just made our site responsive. Congratulations, it was that easy. If I move it, notice how the word test moves back and forth. That's because we're making breakpoints. If we take a look at that word container, I'm going to head over to layout. And what this is going to show is the container is the most basic layout element in Bootstrap and are required when using our default grid system. That's because it contains breakpoints. There's multitude of breakpoints. There's extra large, large, medium, small, and extra small, or essentially mobile. What we're going to do is we're going to use this to create a grid on our website at different breakpoints. Instead of writing this all by hand, it's already built for us inside of Bootstrap. That's awesome. Literally within writing class container and header, we made our site responsive. Now, granted, we only have the word test. There's not much to see what's going on here, but if you notice how it's moving back and forth, that's because the space is breaking based upon the different breakpoints that we have here. And all I typed is the word container to make it work. Cool. You're already on the road. Let's continue. Let's add a navigation inside the header because I want to tell the browser that there's a navigation here. What I'm going to do is take out the word test. I'm going to bring them back so don't lose them for too long. I'm going to say nav and say class equals navbar space navbar expand MD and navbar light. What this is saying is basically I'm going to say make this my navigation bar and change to a mobile navigation bar when it goes to middle, or if we look at go back into Bootstrap, not middle, medium. So the medium says below 720 pixels, make my navigation change from all the words across the top to a navigation bar and make the text stay with the navigation light style. And I'm going to close the nav by typing greater than symbol. And inside of here, I'm going to say A href equals index.html. And I'm going to say logo will go here. Let's put the text first, and then we're going to replace this with a picture afterwards. So the A tag is going to go first. The A represents a link. Where's it going to go? It's going to go to itself for right now. Below this, I want to add a button. This is where my mobile navigation will change to a button. What I'm also is hit the return key and type a couple elements. I'm going to say button class equals navbar, if I can type today, navbar dash, I can't find the keys all of a sudden, toggler. This is just for reference because all these words of navbar toggler, navbar expand, and container all pertain up into Bootstrap. So first I'm going to say is class navbar toggler. The type is going to be a button. I'm then going to say data toggle equals collapse. And below that, I'm going to say data target equals navbar. And I'm going to use capital Nav Alt markup. And we'll show this more in a second. And I'm also going to put a # to reference this as an ID. After the data target, I'm going to say aria controls equals navbar nav alt markup, and aria label equals toggle navigation. So what I then have to do lastly is hit the return key, hit delete, and hit a greater than symbol. The button's going to self-close on itself to work inside the navigation. You'll only see this button when it goes below the medium size. So below 720 pixels, it's going to show this button. What's it going to show otherwise? Well, it's going to show a navigation. So the button is only 1/2. So I'm going to say span class and say navbar toggler icon. This icon is just the 3 little hamburger strips you're used to seeing inside most mobile navigations. And I'll say close span. And after that, I'm going to close the button. So what I should do, it didn't actually indent for me, is the button is along this line and the span goes inside. This is just to add the icon into the button itself. After the button, I'm going to say, whoa, that was supposed to be below the button. There we go. Let's say div class collapse space navbar collapse. And I'm also going to say ID equals navbar nav alt markup. Notice how this ID looks just like this area right up here. This is going to connect this navigation up to this button. The great part about Visual Studio Code is that if I select this, notice how it highlights these 2 words, identifying the words up top. So if I've spelled this wrong, if I put a double M and I select it, notice how it doesn't show up. Pretty great tool inside of VS Code. I'm also going to close this div and add a return key so I'm inside the div class collapse navbar collapse. After that, let's add a navbar. Again, I'm going to say div class equals navbar nav. And what I want to do is I want to move my text over to the right-hand side. So I'm going to say margin left dash auto. I'm going to create the max amount of space to push it to the right using the left margin. After that, what I'm going to do is use the close div, hit less than sign A, class nav dash link. Oops, not to close it quite yet. and say href. We're going to put a £sign for right now, and we'll say about. Then as you can see, this is my navigation. I'm going to have 3 pages, so I'm going to copy and paste. I'm going to have an about, a portfolio, and a contact page. Whew, that was a lot of code going on. So to kind of recap all this all over again, this nav is going to hold my entire navigation right here. The top part is going to have my logo, where it says logo will go here. The button and the span and the close button is going to be the responsive or the mobile button for my navigation. And down below is going to be my actual navigation with the words about, portfolio, and contact. Let's see what happens. Let's save this page, come over, Command R, and check it out. Logo is going to be over here on the left-hand side, and about, portfolio, and contact will be on the right-hand side. Notice how the navigation already has this light gray, and when I roll my mouse over it, it turns darker. That's the power of Bootstrap. We've already built our navigation just like this using Bootstrap. Now let's go in and customize it and add a logo. So I want to bring a picture in to add as a logo. I'm going to create a folder called img for images, and I'm going to bring a picture in. So I'm going to go to other screen that I have, and I'm going to bring this SVG file. That's jacobsmith.svg. Looks like this. It's amazing. I'm going to bring it and put it inside the img folder. The next thing I want to do is I want to reference that image inside of my navigation. So where I had the A tag and logo will go here, I'm going to take out that logo will go here, and I'm going to add > img, which is the image tag, src, and it's already going to know that I'm inside that folder, so I'm going to click on image and jacobsmith.svg. And then from here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to say class logos. I'm going to make a specific class. This is a custom design that I have to do. And I'm going to say alt equals Jacob Smith logo. It's always important to write an alt information. This is more for screen readers to know what this picture is. And then after the alt, I'm going to hit slash and close that tag. That's because images don't have a close tag associated with that. Let's save this and take a look and see how it looks inside of our browser. Oh, it's not there. That's because the SVG file needs a little more work for it to show up. SVGs are very unique. They're not really pictures, as they are just EPS or Illustrator or vector files. So I have to go into my CSS and do some editing. So I already typed the class logo, so let's write a class in our style sheet. Inside our custom CSS, I'm going to say period logo. The period always goes before the word logo or any word that's a class. So since I said class logo in my CSS, I'm going to say period logo. And from here, I have to type the curly brackets. So I'm going to space, open curly bracket, hit the return key, and that creates space inside of the curly brackets for me to type any kind of design. What I have to say is, I have to say width, colon, 100%, and semicolon. And then for my max width, this is how big the logo is ever going to get. I'm going to say max width 250 pixels. And the height will always come with the width. So I'm going to say height auto. The reason why we don't say 100% is 100% would equal a square. So the height automatically comes with the width in proportion to it. And the max width is 250. This just gives me a flexibility in case I want to make the logo bigger or smaller. It'll never get above the 250 mark as it adjusts in size for a responsive design. I'm going to save the CSS, come back, refresh, And what I should see is my logo, Jacob Smith. You can use whatever logo you want. This is just mine right here. What I also want to do is I want to add a little line below this navigation just to delineate the difference between my navigation and the rest of my content. After my logo, what I'm going to say is period navbar. And this navbar corresponds to the top navbar. So I'm affecting everything inside of it down below. In my custom CSS, I'm going to say navbar space semi-curly brackets. And I'm going to say is padding, colon, and then 0.5 rem, 0 rem. What rem stands for is the root em. And ems are much like percentages, but they're based upon the root distance. So I'm saying make this a little bit shorter and take off the right one. So the 0.5 refers to the top and bottom padding, and the second 0 rem refers to the left and right. So when I save this, what's going to happen first is going to move side to side, a little bit off to the left in that direction. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to say border bottom. I'm going to add a bottom border to this design, and border bottom, let me finish typing it, 1px solid gray. And I have to add a little space down below, so I'm going to say margin dash bottom 1 rem, which means this distance is twice the distance as this one right here. So I'm adding some space right below it. Nothing crazy in that design, just something nice and clean going on in this piece. But there's just a slight problem. The J in Jacob lines up to the left right here, but the contact is just a bit off on the right-hand side. We got to fix this last little piece so it's flush to the edge. What I'm going to do is after the navbar, I'm going to say period navbar dash nav space a period navlink. And oops, let's type the word link properly. And let's say last of type. So what is this last of type? And we'll put a space and put curly brackets, hit return. What this is saying is take the last nav link. So if we look at it right down here, we're going to take the last of these 3 nav links. And the reason why I did it this way is if I ever add anything else to this, I can just worry about the last nav link. And the last of type says affect the last one. The colon is what's called a pseudo class. The period is a class, the colon is a pseudo class. And what I want to do is I'm going to say padding right 0. We're going to take off the right padding of the last navigation. If I hit Command R to refresh, now my contact is nice and flush to the edge of the screen right here. Little details make big differences. Now note also what's going to happen is if I adjust my screen size, I'm going to keep going, and notice what happened. When it hits the small size, it now changes in design. And when I click on this button, now About, Portfolio, and Contact are all showing in a vertical design. That's because if we come back to our index, we have a button and it collapses inside that medium size, whereby if I were to change this to LG, for example, and I refresh, now as it gets bigger, the medium is collapsed, and when it goes to large. So if you have a much longer list of type that hits the edge of it, you might want to change your navbar expand from medium to large right here. But since mine's pretty small, I'm going to keep it MD, refresh, and now notice this size holds, but the smaller size now contains the collapse. So if yours is not working, double check that and double check with my code to make sure it matches up. Cool, we have our navigation done. That's pretty looking great. Moves in, moves out. If you're designing at home, you can create your own logo, you can change whatever you want. You can either add or not add this bar. This is just from my demonstration where this bar is going to show up. Our next step we're going to do is we're going to add a full width picture right below Jacob Smith. We're going to write the HTML first and then connect everything inside the CSS. I'm going to head back to index and go down below the header. On my screen, that's line 33. You might have a slightly different direction depending upon how you're building your design. I'm going to hit the return key 3 times. Trying to talk and hit the keys at the same time was difficult at that given moment. I'm going to say div class and say equal quote site content. This is where the bulk of all of my stuff is going to go. I usually have 3 areas. I have the header up top, I have the site content or a main section in between, and then below, which we're going to get into later on, we're going to add a footer. So inside this site content, I'm going to say the following: div class equal masthead. And I'm going to close the masthead by hitting greater than symbol in the div. I'm going to say div class equals black dash overlay. And I'll show you what this does. You can imagine it's going to create a black overlay on our picture. And I'm also going to say deflex. We'll go into this a little bit later as well. I'm going to open and close by saying div class black overlay deflex. I'm going to create a third div that says div class deflex align items center and content box. These two pertain to Bootstrap. This one, oops, let me do a double click. The content box we're going to create ourselves. And I'm going to hit the greater than symbol and just say less than sign H1, welcome to my portfolio. And if I save this, nothing should really change aside from coming over, Command R, and it just should say welcome to my portfolio. We haven't designed anything yet, but I want to make sure that the HTML is set successfully so I can go into my CSS and make all the magic happen. Cool. Now we've got the HTML looking good, let's head over to our CSS. Inside of our custom CSS, I'm at the return key twice after the navbar nav, and I'm going to say period masthead. The reason why I typed period first is a period corresponds to a class, and the masthead right here is it says class masthead. So inside my custom CSS, I'll say period masthead, curly brackets open and close. I'm going to say width 100% and semicolon that. I'm then going to say min height. I'm going to use something very unique. I'm going to say 60 VH. And the VH corresponds to the vertical height. Think of 60 as 60%. I want this picture, what I have, where'd it go? Not this one. I want this picture 60% of the screen no matter how big or small I make it. So it's not a fixed height, it's a percentage of the overall vertical width. So I said 60 vertical height. I'm also going to say background size. I'm going to say cover. This means the picture will always fit the size no matter the size of the screen, be it mobile or tablet. Background size cover, background position. I'm going to say center. And I'm going to say background repeat, no repeat. Make sure it's not going to duplicate itself over and over again. I'll then say margin bottom to give it some space below at 10 px, and position will be relative. The relative means it's going to hold the space, but inside is going to have an absolute area. After the masthead, what I'm going to say is I'm going to add the black overlay. I'm also following my code. The masthead goes first, the black overlay goes second, and the content box goes third. In my custom CSS, I'm going to say black overlay. If you eventually want a white overlay, just change it from black to white and this corresponding number coming up as well. Curly brackets, I'm going to say display WebKit dash flex, and I'll also say display flex. This just catches any WebKits in the Chrome and Safari from some legacy code. Display flex, I will then say background color, and here is where the black overlay comes in. I'm going to say RGBA, and this corresponds to the red, green, and blue values and the alpha. Since black is 0, 0, 0, my overlay I want to add is 20%. So I'm going to say 0.2. This number corresponds to the red, the second 0 corresponds to the green, and the third number corresponds to the blue, and this is 20%. Instead of having to go to Photoshop and add a black overlay, I can do it in code. So if I want to make it darker or lighter, I can set it right here. From here, I'm going to say height 100% to fill the space. Align items, this is going to help the next box coming up, to center. Text align, I'm going to put my text in the center of the screen. If you don't want to, you can take this part out, but I'm going to keep it in here. Display block, position is absolute, and what it's going to say is this is going to fill the absolute positioning above, which initially was relative. This helps it create the space, and I'm going to say width 100%. If we take a look, we'll see some things happening, but not all the way yet. Notice how it created a box that there's no picture behind yet, but that's 20% gray in theory, and the text ended up in the center of this box. The next box and help move it to the actual middle of the screen. So the next thing I have to do is add a content box. What I'm going to do down below is add content box and say max width 750 pixels. That means it doesn't get too big. Because I can make this box as big as I want it to fit somewhere in the middle and not be so long that it becomes too hard to read. Max width 750 pixels. Margin will be 0 pixels and auto, so it stays in the middle. And color will be white. So I'm going to change the text to white. Now when I refresh my screen, welcome to my portfolio. Now you can notice there is no picture in the background. So let's change that. Let's actually add a background image for this to work. So I want to bring a picture into this design. I've got a picture off screen, and what I'm going to do is inside that images folder, I'm going to copy my picture, which I called index image. It looks like this. It's a big picture. I want to bring it into my index.html. So what I have to do is I have to reference a style or an inline piece of code inside the masthead. So inside for me, this is line 36 and div class masthead. I'm going to say style equals background image. And that background image, it also brings in, when I hit the return key, a semicolon, which is what I need to have. I'm going to say URL, parentheses, single quote, and reference the location of it in relationship to the index file. I'm going to hit single period to indicate that it's in the same folder and say slash, and now it picks up the image folder. And now I can say index image. So what I did was I said style, background image, and the URL or the uniform resource locator, a single period indicates it's in the same folder with the images folder, and in the images folder is indeximage.jpg. And just like that, when I refresh the screen, now that picture comes in full screen. What I can also do is I can adjust the browser and notice how the picture adjusts as well. So no matter how big or how small this gets, that 60 VH holds it into place. So if I move this up, notice how that 60 is still holding. The great part about this is it doesn't matter how big or how small I make the screen size, that picture fills the space. That's the magic of all that CSS code. Next thing I want to do is I want to add a basic paragraph down below just after this picture. So after all of this information down below, inside still my site content, but not inside the masthead. So I'm going to bring it right below that area down here. I'm going to say div class container. The container again holds my information amongst a certain size. The up top part of the navigation had my container and it stops right here. I didn't want the container because I wanted this whole picture to go from edge to edge. But now I have text and I want it to move and adjust in a responsive format. So I said div class container, and I'm also going to add something brand new. We'll type in HTML first and then do the CSS second. I'm going to say div class single call. This is to add a single column of information while still making it move back and forth per the container. I'm then going to add a paragraph. And for this example, I'm going to head over to lipsum.com. Lipsum.com. Oops, didn't type it right. That's not going to work. Lorem ipsum. There it is. Lipsum.com. So what I want to do is, at the very bottom of the page, I'm going to grab one paragraph. Lorem ipsum has been the de facto dummy type of all designs since we had graphic design for the most part, and no sense in changing what doesn't work or what does work still. So I'm going to copy and paste this text and add a p tag. A p tag is a paragraph. And I'm going to copy and paste the paragraph so it adds it in right here. When I save it and come back to the work of Jacob Smith and hit Command R, notice how long this text is. Beyond a certain distance, I call it reader fatigue. Your reader has trouble reading because they have to come your eye from this right-hand side all the way over to the left-hand side. So what I want to do is I want to write a single call. Remember how we typed 750 pixels for our masthead? If we look at the very top, the content box contains 650. We're going to duplicate that same information. What I'm going to say is, I'm going to say single call. And the reason why I didn't use a dash is this is different than those columns we're going to use in the future inside of our portfolio. So the single call with a capital C, if I hit the curly brackets, I'm going to say max width is 750 pixels. That to me says that's about as far as the reader can read across the screen without getting any reader fatigue or making it difficult to read. I'm then going to say margin left equals auto and margin right equals auto. This keeps it in the middle of the screen, and then once it gets below 750, the container kicks into gear. So if I say save, now what's going to happen is the paragraph got a little bit narrower, and if you notice on the screen, it's a little bit easier to read. And below 750 pixels, what's going to happen is notice how this is going to fit perfectly fine inside the space of the container on the screen. So above 750, it stops, and below 750, it kicks into gear. This is just more if I want to add a single column in the middle of the page. It can be used here and there, but that's how I created a single call. Cool, you've accomplished a lot. You've got the navigation done, you have welcome to my portfolio in the middle, and a single paragraph with a single call down below. The last thing I want to do is I want to add a footer to this design. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to head back to the index, and I don't have to worry about this site content. What's also a cool feature in VS Code is I can hit this little arrow on the left-hand side and just close up my content for right now. It just prevents it from getting in the way of any distractions. I'm at the return key. I'm on line 52 for my design, and I'm going to say footer. This is where all of the content for the footer is going to go. I'm going to say div class equal container. There's our famous container. And I'll also say text center. This is to add the text in the center of the screen. Inside this div, I'm going to add a p tag. I can open and close it. And inside the p tag, I'm going to say find me on, and in here, I'm going to say href equals quote # Facebook. Add a comma, say less than sign href equals sign # Instagram, making sure I'm spelling this correctly. And also I'm going to say and href equals #, we'll add the big 3 of Twitter. Now you don't have to have these if you don't want to, but if you do have a Facebook page, you're going to change the # to the Facebook URL. With the Instagram, the same thing, change the # to the Instagram URL, and the Twitter, you'll change the # to the Twitter URL. So the top part of the footer is going to have the social media links of Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Outside this div, the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to say div class container and text center again. This provides a little space between the two of them, and it's also where I can separate them if I want anything different down the road. What I'm going to do is say p, and not close it quite yet. I'm going to say p small, p class small. What this is going to do is it's going to make the text a little smaller than the top footer, and now I'm going to close the p tag. I'm then going to say the following. I'm going to say ampersand. This is a unique design. And I'll say copy semicolon. That actually adds the copyright symbol in what's called ASCII or ASCII. Long story short, it's the ampersand, word copy, and semicolon. And I'm going to add something brand new. I'm going to say less than tag span ID equals year. We're going to write some JavaScript to put the year in, so that way every year it's the same. Span ID year greater than /span, and we can say comma my company. So we can add a copyright to the very bottom. What does this year do? Well, down below the footer, what I'm going to say is the word script. I'm going to open and close the script just like these down here before. And all I'm going to say is document period get element by ID. What's the element? It's the year. So we'll say quote year, and we'll say inner HTML. And the HTML is going to equal, if I type it properly, that I hit the right or wrong keys, equals new date, and the date is going to have parentheses and say get full year. So it's going to pull the full year in JavaScript and add it up top. The get full year will have also an open close parentheses and semicolon. Congratulations, you just typed your first JavaScript. That's all it has to do is sit there at the very bottom. As long as year and year correspond, when I save and come back over here and refresh the page, it says copyright 2020 my company. Cool. We've pretty much built this entire first page. It looks really good. Now we've got our first page built, we're going to head over to the About page and then build our portfolio page and then build the contact page. So what I want to do is I want to put names of these pages into the About, Portfolio, and Contact, and then we'll go and actually build the About page. In the index page, we come back up to the top where it says About. I'm on line 27 for me. The href where I type $, I'm going to say about.html. In the portfolio, I'm going to say portfolio.html. And the contact, I'm going to say contact.html. Now these won't work yet, but they will once we build the about page. I want to put them in because eventually they will work as I create multiple pages. So with the about page, what I want to do is come over to, if I go out one step, where I have the index.html, I'm going to duplicate that page and say index.copy. I'm going to change to the word about. And now I'm going to have two pages, one index and one about HTML. I'm going to drag this into Visual Studio Code, and now I have two files. I have the about and I have the index file. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to change the title and say about vertical line, which is the shift backslash on the keyboard, and say about the work of Jacob Smith. If I save that and I refresh this page on the work of Jacob Smith, if I click the about page, now it says about. And if I click on Jacob Smith, it takes me back to the home page. Granted, both pages look exactly the same, so let's do something about that. We're not going to touch the footer and we're not going to touch the header. We're just going to touch the inside section. And we know where that is because I can close the header up. I'm going to close the index for right now, so I'm just in the about section. And what I can do is I can close the header, and down below I can close the footer. So all I'm working on is this site content, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to take everything out except for that last div and just say test, not text. If I say test, save, I am on the about page, so I have to go to about. Now it should just say the word test. Notice how I'm quickly testing things a lot of times to make sure I'm not breaking something in the process. The reason why I test so frequently is if I make a mistake at that given time, I know it's only a few lines of code of where I've broken it to where I can go back and fix it. So with the about page, I'm making this really clean. I'm going to have a picture of me, which I found a stock photo thereof, and some lorem ipsum type as well. I'm going to bring in a new picture, so in my images, and if you want to find a picture of yourself, go for it. So I'm going to find a picture of Jacob Smith, and I'm going to bring him in right here. Notice there he is, Jacob Smith, looking handsome, looking stylish, looking like a stock picture going on. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put that picture in and add some lorem ipsum type. So inside my site content, I'm going to take out that word test. I'm going to bring back div class, and I'm going to say single call. What I also want to do is with the single call, I want to add a container. So I'm going to say container in site content. Just once again, the site content delineates where the content is, and the container is where everything moves around. So the single call, hit the return key, and I can bring back the word test if I want to make sure that if I test this, Command R, there it is. Single call will eventually line up perfectly to Jacob Smith, but when it gets so big, it's going to hold the 750 pixel distance inside of right here. I'm going to say H1, and I'm going to say about Jacob Smith. This is going to show the information of, okay, this is going to say about Jacob Smith, the title of the page. Not the title up here. This is the meta information, but the H1, did I not save it? There it is, about Jacob Smith. So H1, about Jacob Smith, close H1. I'm then going to type img src equals, put that little period, slash, and say image and jacobsmith.jpg. That's going to be the picture of him versus the Jacob Smith SVG, which was the logo. jacobsmith.jpg equals that. Alt, I will say Jacob Smith portrait in here. In class, I'm going to add something brand new. Just because I'm going to run out some room, I'm going to hit the return key on these. This is just for readability on the screen. I'm going to hit the return key, and the return key once again, I'm going to say class, and I'm going to say portrait image. I want to make some custom code so that the picture fits and that it moves around the text, or variably the text moves around the picture. In the class portrait image, I'm going to close the word image, and just so we can see it shows up on the screen, let's save it. Again, I'm just saving things quickly to make sure they're going to work successfully. So there it is, a big picture of Jacob Smith. 1, it's too big, and 2, text will never fill the space around it. So inside the CSS, I'm going to write the code for portrait image. So in the custom CSS, what I'm going to do is after a single call, I want to write a portrait image. And I'm going to say period portrait dash image. And this is the rare time I'm going to include a float in my custom CSS, but I want the picture to float around the text. I'm going to say float colon left semicolon, add a max width of how big this picture could get, which I'm going to say 200 pixels. And I'm going to add some margin around this design. I'm going to say margin colon 5px, 15px, 15px, and 0px. How this works is the margin, there's 4 sides to a box. This is the top margin, the right margin, the bottom margin, and the left margin. Since this picture is going to be floating to the left, I don't want a margin on the left-hand side. So if I save, refresh, now the picture dropped down. And we're going to fix this. Don't worry, we're going to fix this piece in a second. And in fact, I did forget to do the footer. So let's fix the footer while we're here. So the float happens because we're floating the picture, so everything else floats up to the top. So what we'll do is let's bring in some text. We'll push the text down, and then we'll finish the footer that I forgot to do at originally the time I said I was going to do it. So what I'm going to do is let's add some text onto the about page. So after the image, what I want to do is I'm going to add some lorem ipsum, which I can grab from the index page. So if I come on the index page and I scroll down to site content, I'm going to grab the same lorem ipsum. Again, this is just dummy type, so you can put whatever about information you want. So what I want to do is, after the picture, I'm going to add the paragraph right here, and we'll add 2 paragraphs just to add maybe 3 paragraphs. That way it looks like this Jacob Smith is very, very important. He's got 3 paragraphs of information, and I didn't save it, which could really help. There it goes. So notice now about Jacob Smith sits at the top. Our picture here is on the left. And what's going to happen is even when this gets a little smaller, that picture is still going to hold on the left-hand side. It won't be massively big. And yes, I promised you I'm working on the footer. I'm going to do it right now. So what I want to do is I have to go back to the time I missed and fix the footer. So I'm going to head back to the custom CSS and finish stylizing my footer that I didn't finish before, even though I told you that I was going to do that. So the footer always goes to the bottom of the style sheet because it's the last thing on the page. I'm going to say footer. Now note that there is no period because in any of the pages, the footer is a tag. So whenever you see the word, or whenever you see a tag inside the HTML, there's no period because the classes have periods and tags do not. So the footer is all by itself. I'm going to write inside the footer, background, color, gray, and add some padding. I'm going to say 5 rem and 0 rem to say I want top and bottom to have padding, but not left and right. I'm not going to affect the container or the single call in this case. I'm going to say padding bottom, it usually catches, it did not. Padding bottom 1 rem, just add a little extra padding as well. And color white in here. So what I'm going to do, if we come back and take a look, we just added some additional padding on the top and bottom of this design. I want it a little bit obscure, so it's a little bit not centered. If you want to take off that padding bottom, so if I want to take this piece off, what you can also have is a little bigger padding at the bottom. I felt that this was too much padding down below as it is above, so I decided to write padding bottom like this. Just my own different change when it came to a bottom footer design. You'll also notice that I can't read the words Instagram and Facebook. That's because by default, links are blue. But I have to change the link in the bottom to make it be readable because I added a background color of gray. So what I have to do is I'm going to say footer A. That's going to say all the A tags that I created. So in the footer, there we are. There's an A tag, there's an A tag, and there's an A tag. And what that's going to do is going to change all those links to a different color. So footer A, what I'm going to say is color light gray, just to give it a lighter gray in this case. And then what I have to do next is, so that's good, but notice when I roll my mouse over it, it still goes to that blue underline. I just want to change this so it's a little not so heavy on the blue color. So what I want to do is, after this, say footer A hover. This is going to be when I hover my mouse over that link. And what I want to say here is color white and text decoration, if I spell it properly, I want to make sure the underline holds. Just in case anything changes, I want to set that rule. And so when I save and refresh, there it goes. Just a nice clean design at the bottom of my screen. You can change it to whatever you want. If you don't want the text decoration, you can say none. And what's going to happen is now the underline disappears. So it's up to you. I wanted to leave this piece in if you wanted to change that or not in your design. I promise I'd set the styling for the footer, and here you go. Let's move on now to our portfolio section of our website. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to duplicate the about page, and I'm going to change from about copy to portfolio. And in here, I'm going to drag it up to VS Code, and let's take out some code as well. The first thing I want to do, of course, is change from about to portfolio. And now what we should see is if I refresh the pages, portfolio shows up top, index, the work of Jacob Smith, and I can go to about and portfolio. All the links are slowly working. No, I'm not clicking on the word contact yet. And I want to create a portfolio page. So the first thing I have to do is get rid of all the about content. I'm going to take out the single call, but I want to leave in the container and the site content. Those two will remain pretty much the same. What I want to do here is I want to create a grid. If I save and refresh, it should show an empty page. There it is. What I want to do is I want to create a grid of pictures. And this is where the container really shines. If we head back to Get Bootstrap, there's a whole grid system that we can use to build. So I can build 3 columns of pictures. So we're going to use this grid. And if you want to read more about it, you can at getbootstrap.com. And by going to the grid section, you can do so many things. So I'm going to build a basic grid, and then we'll bring content in after that. So inside of my site content of my container, I'm going to type the first piece. Oops, what I also forgot to do was type H1 and say portfolio. Always make sure you have the H1 on the top of the page, so the H1 now shows that it's the portfolio. Now after the portfolio, what I have to do is I'm going to type div class row. The row designates that inside of the row are going to be columns. I'm going to say div class and say call MD or call -MD -4. I'm going to say test. You're kind of seeing a pattern here. And I'm going to copy this 2 more times. So what I'm going to have, if we do some basic math, 4 plus 4 plus 4. 4 plus 4 plus 4 equals 12. And this is a 12-column grid. What do I mean by a 12-column grid? Let's take a look. Notice it says test, test, and test. There's essentially 12 columns to this design. So if I were to say call MD10 and 1 and 1, that still equals 12. So notice how this test is 10 times the length of these two over here on the right-hand side. If I went above 12 and said 10, 1, 2, that word test goes down below to the next line. So the 12 columns are what's going to work. In this case, I'm going to say 4, 4, and 4. And that's going to bring me back to a 3-column design inside of my portfolio. This is also helpful to make sure I stop and make sure it works first before I go forward. So the next step I have to do is add a card to this design. And cards are also in Bootstrap. And in the content section or in the component section, there is a card. And a card just looks like this. There's a picture up top, a card title, some quick text, and a button, but it just has a slight rounded rectangle to it in all of the cards. So we're going to use 3 cards to design our pages with. Again, we're going to write the HTML first, and where it doesn't fit, we're going to stylize inside of our CSS. Inside of the word test, the first one, or the first column, I'm going to say the following. Div class equals card. And for some reason, it didn't kick the close. That's strange. There it goes. Making sure there's always a closed div associated with an open div. For some reason, mine didn't catch, so I went back and fixed it. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to say div class equal card image top and say card top. One of these does already work within Bootstrap, and we're going to do a little unique twist to it. So here what I'm going to do is say close div. Inside of this design, I'm going to say the following. A, href, and #. We're going to create the link next. I'm going to say image goes here. And we're going to come back to this image section. After the card image top, I'm going to add a card body. So I'm going to say div class equal card body. And from here, I'm going to say h2 class equal card title and open and close the h2. This is a title of our portfolio project. The h2 is going to designate what I'm going to show. Notice how h1 comes first and h2 goes second. And what I'm also going to do is I'm going to save, and let's test and see, does this thing actually look somewhat like a card? All right, we're looking pretty good. Image goes here, which we're going to work on, and this is a title of our portfolio project. What we should also do is we should create a link to the title of our project. So I'm at the return key on h2, and just so it's a little spaced apart, I'm going to cut this out and say $A, href, #, close the A, and just so I have this linkable as well. And there we go. Image goes here, and this is a title of our portfolio project. So let's go ahead and bring in some pictures for our portfolio. So let's bring in 3 pictures inside the images that's going to correspond to my portfolio. I have my first picture right here. I have a lot of photographs of the South Pacific, so they end up being cool pictures of the South Pacific. This one is an island called Aitutaki. Looks like this. My next picture I'm going to bring in, which I named so well, I called it Beach 01. Another picture of a beach. There it is. And my third picture I'm going to bring in, if I click and drag it in, is Tamanu Beach, which looks like this. So I want to bring in these three pictures. Also note how small or large these photographs are. I want to make sure these pictures are not ginormous because the longer it takes to load the photo up, the longer it takes my site to load. So I'm going to focus on the first picture first and then go down below. Now, what I'm also going to do inside my CSS in a little bit is manually crop these photographs. Keep in mind with cards that every photograph or every picture either has to be the same size done manually, or I'm going to do a manual crop inside of CSS to just crop the pictures a little bit so that they are the perfect size. Granted, these pictures were all taken with the same camera and I didn't crop them, but do be aware you do have to make the pictures all the same size for the cards to look consistent. So what I'm going to do back up to the top is where I said image goes here, I'm going to add the image. So I'm going to take out the image, and just for readability, I'm going to make the return key drop down. I'm going to say image src and hit period slash, and inside the first one, I'm going to say Aitutaki. And in here, I'm always going to add an alt. So just for readability, I'm going to run out of real estate on the screen. I'm going to drop down just a little bit and say alt equals beach of the island of Aitutaki. And once again, you can add whatever alt you want to add to your project. So once I have this piece, I'm going to add the following class as well. I'm going to say class equals image dash fluid. And what this is going to make is that picture is now going to be a fluid slash at the end to close the image tag. This picture is going to be fluid, which means it's going to move bigger and smaller based upon the size of the screen. Let's save this and take a look. Notice how the photo fits in this design, and as it gets bigger or smaller, notice how it fits in the design. Now again, I haven't cropped this picture yet. This is just the way it is. But do know if we had all three across the page, if we didn't have the same size picture, they wouldn't look uniform if I go across and I envision three photographs across. So I will go into CSS. I'm going to make a little bit of a manual crop after this, but I first want to make sure it shows up okay. And this is up title of our portfolio project. And there it is. And this is a mobile site as well. Notice the mobile site that the word test and test become all a single column. Pretty cool, I think. So let's go into our CSS and do a little bit of a manual crop to this photograph. So I'm going to head over to my custom CSS, and I'm going to put this above the footer but below the portrait image, because to me the footer always goes at the very bottom. So the first thing I also should note is that the cards don't have any bottom margins to them. So what I have to do is I'm going to say card margin bottom, if I spell this properly, to REM. So all my measurements are more uniform. After that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to say card cap. And this is going to cap my picture to a certain height just so it all holds consistent. I'm going to say card cap, and I'm going to say max height 150 pixels. And I'm going to say overflow equals hidden. This will prevent the picture from going too big in my design. And I noticed I made a mistake earlier. So I said card cap in my CSS, which is the correct way, but when I was typing it in my portfolio, I said card top. So I'm on line 40 on my design, and the card top should be card cap. In my notes, I just read it way too fast. So if I save it, notice how this crops the picture to a max height of 150 pixels. That's okay. To me, it still shows well on a smaller site, and it looks pretty good back and forth. This is just more of a sizing piece. I can make a note that I can say in my page that the card cap is optional. There it goes. Command / adds a note to it or a comment there, but I don't have to use this if I don't want to, but it's there if I do. So moving on in my CSS, I want to then, since I'm here anyways, let's change the H2 because this title is pretty darn big for my portfolio. The H2 is used properly. It's a subtitle of the portfolio, but it's a little big on the screen. So what I want to do is, after the card cap, I'm going to say card H2. The reason why I said H2 card is this only affects titles inside of cards. And since the cards are only on the portfolio screen, I'm good to go. I will say font size 2EM, and this will move based upon the relative. Notice that before I said REM, this is 2EM. So the base size is 1, so I'm doubling the base size. Can I not save it? Oh, it actually is the same size. So I'm just holding it to the right size at font size, card H2. I'll then say margin bottom of 0 pixels since I'm not having anything below it. And notice how it just moved just a little bit down here. If this type is too big or too small, you can say card H2 0.8. And what's going to happen is now the type is really small. It all depends how big or how small you want that title to be. But for my demonstration purposes, I liked card size H2 at 2. And there we go. And normally I might not have as long, or I might have something as long. So just you have to decide what the optimal size is for your project. Also, I wanted to change the design so it's not this blue color by default. So I'm going to change the font style, or not the font style, the color of the font, what I wanted to say, and say card title A. And in here, I want to say inherit, just to bring it back to the basics. There we go. Now I'm going to bring it back to black. The inherit goes back to the root color, which was originally black. So it jumped over the A and back to the title. Again, if you want to change this color, it's up to you. I just want to go back to black, and notice now you roll your mouse over it and it shows black with underline. Pretty cool. If you want to change that look again, here's an optional piece you can do. I can say card title A hover, and when you roll your mouse over it, you can change it to whatever you want. So I could say text decoration, none, and color, we'll just say green for the fun of it for right now. Again, these are optional settings you can do. So if I refresh, now it just turns green. So you can choose, again, optional colors and styles above. So once again, this hover above for hover. So you can choose whatever you want in this design, or you don't have to have anything if you don't want to. This is just for your reference, how you want to stylize it in your portfolio. So let's go back to that portfolio and add in the rest of our information. So what I can do is I can copy my card and duplicate my information. So what I can do is, while I'm here anyways, let me go and copy card. And notice the great part about the indentation is I can see where the card begins and ends. So I can then remove the word test, and it comes in, and I can remove the word test, and it comes in as well. Let me save and test. There we go. We have 3 now cards, which I want to change the pictures of and put Beach 01 for number 2, and we'll add the last one of Tamanu Beach for number 3. So what I can do is that this is the first one of I2Talkie. The next one I'm going to change to Beach01. I do recommend naming your files better than just Beach01, but at the time it was a beach photograph, and there you go. And I will say, this is literally a beach. Again, the alt information you will not see. I'll save this, and I will say that this is beach photo. And now when I save and refresh, the reason why that 150 cap was in place is notice how every picture lines up perfectly. And this is my beach photo. The third one I'm going to add is Tamanu Beach. I'm going to copy the file name. I'm going to come down. I'm going to change number 3 and say Tamanu Beach. And then I'm going to say at the bottom, Tamanu Beach. Just so we have 3 distinctly different designed pieces. And we'll change this first title from Not So Long to I2Talkie. And save. And now I have I2Talkie, beach photo, Tamanu Beach. Again, you can do whatever you want for the titling if you want, the sizing, the styling, and these pieces. I wanted to give you options for your portfolio, but note also when I go to one column that it shows the 3 photographs moving at 150 pixels each, which is fine, and each says I2Talkie, beach photo, and Tamanu. And I go back and it's back to 3 columns. That's the power of Bootstrap. So what I want to take next is I want to have it when you click on this picture or click on I2Talkie, you see the picture full screen. Let's create a new page for that portfolio image. So instead of duplicating the portfolio, I'm going to go back and duplicate the About page. And let's do some cleanup. I only need the portfolio file open and the custom CSS for later. So I'm going to come back to my images folder, go back to my About section or my About HTML, duplicate it, and say portfolio dash I2Talkie in this direction. So what I want to do is I'm going to add the picture on that page. So when I'm on the portfolio.I2Talkie, I'm going to change the title to say I2Talkie, and the work of Jacob Smith still stays there. Down below, inside my container, my site content, I don't need a single call, so I'm going to take this out. I'm going to head down and take out everything except for container and site content. From here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a picture. Whenever I can, I like to add a P tag around pictures. So P and then IMG, SRC. I always add a period because it's an old school coding technique. And we'll say image, and we'll say I2Talkie. Alt, I2Talkie. And we're going to add a class of image fluid. That's going to hold the space successfully. And slash close image. Let's take a look and see how it looks. And there's our picture. The image fluid just adjusts based upon the size and the title up here as well. If you want to add an H1, you're welcome to. So I can say H1, this is a photo of I2Talkie. I2Talkie. There we go. And now I have, this is a photo of I2Talkie, and the photograph shows up right here. What we have to do is we have to link up that file back in our portfolio. So what I'm going to do is where I had those pound signs before. So I'm on line 41, and where the link is of the picture of I2Talkie, I'm going to copy and paste that link up at the top, portfolio I2Talkie, and the same with the title down below. Now when I save this and test this out, if I go back to the home page and back to the portfolio, and iTutaki, now I get the full-size picture, and I can either click on the portfolio to go back, or I can click the back button to go back as well. Awesome! You have a portfolio. That's great. Now let's hit the contact section, the easiest and also a little bit of the most complicated section because we're going to create a form in there as well. So let's create a contact page. Again, I'm going to duplicate the about page. So I'll say about, copy, and contact. And let's bring that page up into VS Code. I'm going to change about to contact. And now we have all our pages ready to go. If I refresh this and I click on contact, yes, it does say about, but I'm looking at the word contact. Portfolio is working and about is working. So let's add some information to this page. On the contact page, you guessed it, I'm going to get rid of everything else except for the H1. And you know what, let's take out the single call while we're at it. We'll bring it back later on if we need it. There we go. Container site content. I want H1. Contact me. Perfect. Now I can save that, and then what it should look like on the contact page is the word contact me. Nothing crazy about it. So I'm going to create two columns. On the left-hand side, I'm going to say phone number and email address, and the right-hand side is going to have a form that you can contact me with. So what I want to do first is I'm going to build the columns. So I'm going to say down below, div class row, like we did before in the portfolio section. And I'm going to keep them equal. So I'm going to say div class and say call MD6. Remember that 12 column design? We're going to say test for the first one and test for the second one. What I want to make sure I can see is I have two columns. If this works, great. If it doesn't work, not great. So perfect. I'm going to focus on the first left-hand side first, and I'm going to then get the next one over here done. So in that test, I'm going to say P. I always do that where I select the text. There we go. P tag, and we will say here, email, colon, and let's add an email address. Let's just create some space. You can see it easier on the screen. href. And when it comes to an email, I'm going to say mail to, colon, and the email address. We'll say hi at jacobsmithdesigns.com. If you are actually watching this and this is Jacob Smith Designs, don't shoot me. I just made that up completely. So you can say anything you want. You can say your domain name. You can have a Gmail address. It doesn't matter. So what I have to do is I'm going to take that email address, close the A tag, and now say hi. Just for spacing issues, it might be easier if you just see it this way, just so it's not so hard to read on the screen. So there is our email, and then we'll say P tag as well, phone, and say 415-555-3452. And now what this should look like is cool. I have email address, hi at yourdomainname.com, and phone number is here for someone to contact you. Perfect. Now let's get into building this form. Forms used to be crazy complicated. Why? They required a server to parse the information and to send you the response back. The great part is there is a thing called Netlify, one of the best hosting platforms out there on the planet. And we're going to run our site through Netlify. What Netlify also has, whoa there, let's go to Netlify Forms. And what Netlify also provides, which is so awesome, is Netlify provides form implementation on your website. We're going to utilize the Netlify forms and launch our site onto Netlify right now. So since we're on Netlify, let's go ahead and sign up. there is no cost for this platform, just so you're aware. The pricing only kicks in, where it goes, it is free. It is free to get started across the board. It can get a lot crazier once you get into password protected, Slack notifications, a whole bunch of things. But by default, it is a free tool to host your site. Just so you're aware, and you can skip over the section if you just go, oh my God, this is too much information. You get one site or one concurrent build at a time. You get 100 gigabytes a month of bandwidth. I have like 10 sites and I could do about 1 to 2 gigabytes a month of bandwidth, but just so you know, they do charge for bandwidth. Build minutes, which we're not going to worry about, and you can have unlimited websites on this section. It's pretty incredible. So I'm going to log in, but for you, if you've never used this, sign up. You can sign up by using one of three areas, either GitHub, GitLab, Bitbucket, or just with your email. And I'm going to go ahead and log in. I have a bunch of sites that I have right here, but for my page, which you'll see on your site, want to deploy a new site without connecting to Git, drag and drop your site folder here. Well, let's do just that. What I'm going to do is in my portfolio website, I'm going to go out one level, ignore this totally messy desktop section. I'm going to drag this portfolio website in right here. Want to deploy a new site? Just drag and drop it. What it's going to do is upload the files to Netlify, give you a website URL, and you have your website online. Like, that's it. You're done. The website itself is at this nostalgic Ptolemy EC5B71.netlify. That's really all it takes to launch a website on Netlify. So now that we're working in the Netlify framework, we can now work on Netlify forms. To me, Netlify just makes everything so much easier. So now whenever I want to upload my website, all I have to do is go to production deploys. So just so you're aware, under overview, it says production deploys. I can click on it, and there is that drag and drop your site folder. So what I'm going to do is drag and drop, and I can always make changes as I need to. That's pretty awesome. All right, strap yourselves in, because here we go. We're going to build a form inside of that second column on our contact page. So I'm going to take out the word test, and I'm going to write the following. Less than sign form. And in the form, we have to write a couple things. The name of the form is going to be general form V1. And I'll show you why the V1 comes in down the line. After that, I'm going to say method is a post. If you think about Google, you're getting results from a form. And in this instance, you're posting results. You're putting content forward in a form. Method post. I'm going to say Netlify to tell it it's a Netlify form. Data Netlify, I'm going to say is true. So it's going to post data to Netlify. And I'm also going to add a honeypot, which is going to catch spammers to make your form even better. So I'm going to say data Netlify honeypot equals bot field. So I can catch any bots that try to spam me using my form. And I'm going to say on submit equal submit. So send this forward. I'm going to close up this form by saying slash, and I have to write slash form. I don't know why I didn't catch before, but making sure you have an open form and a close form tag. Here we go. What I next have to say is I'm going to indent and say input. And this type is going to be a hidden form, just because we want to put some metadata in here as well. So I'm going to say input type hidden, name equals form dash name, and value is going to be the same as before, general form v1. And the input opens and closes just like the image tag. So I set input type hidden. The next thing I want to do is add a p class and say d none. What that basically means is don't show this paragraph, which is fine because this is where that little honeypot or that form catch is going to go. I'm going to say label, and I will say don't fill this out. And we're going to add an input name bot field. Remember before? What this is going to do is that if someone tries to fill this out, which is hidden, which only the bots can see, then it won't display this and return information to me. So it's a way of catching information at any given time. So again, if I save this and take a look on the contact page, all you're going to see is the word test, which I have somewhere, or I didn't save it right. It's somewhere, and there it is. So what I want to do next is, that test is hanging around somewhere. I got to figure out where that place is. Oh, you know what it is? That's because I'm on the Netlify app. If I go back to the actual desktop and say contact, now it is gone. I'm like, where did that test file go? So I'm going to close up these extra screens so I don't get confused. Cool. We put in the hidden field. Now I want to do is we want to add additional fields to our design whereby we can collect information. So after that p tag, that's the only p tag I have to worry about, I'm going to say div class equals form group. This is going to group my information, and I'm going to say label, and I'll say first name in this label. I'm then going to say input type text and say name equals first dash name. And I want to make this required, so someone has to type in their information. I'll say required. I'm going to run out of room on this last one, so I'm going to say class form control, just so I add a bit of a design to this. And I'll say slash input. So I'm going to group this together. So first name, and form control. I'm then going to go down below and do it again and say div class equals form group, open and close, label, I'll say last name. And after the label, input, hopefully you're seeing a pattern pretty soon, type equals text, and we'll say name equals last name. And again, I'm not going to run out of room on my screen, so I'll say required to require the last name, and class equals form control. What does this look like so far? Let's take a look. Let's save it. And there we go. First name sits above, and if I try to type it, and eventually I'm going to create a submit button, those are both required. The design already came from Bootstrap. So I already created a form design automatically. That's so nice. And it's totally responsive. Check that out. Pretty cool. So I have form group, first name, last name. I then want to create one from an email address. So I'm going to say div class equals form dash group, end quote, open and close. And I'm going to say label and close my label up and say email address, because I want to make sure I collect their email address because I want to respond back to them in that form. So label is email address, input type is now email. So it's not text, it is email, so the actual form knows this is an email address. In the type email, I'm going to run out of room again. So I'm going to hit the return key and say, of course, like we had name, I will say name equals email, require, because I want them to fill out their email address, and class, again, I'm going to say form control. And if I close it with a slash and a greater than symbol, we have our form group for email address. The last thing I want to do is add a comment section. So I'll say again, div class equals form group. And in here, I'm going to say label. And I will say comments. You're kind of seeing the pattern in this one. But this last section is going to contain a text area, because the text area will have multiple lines of text versus an input is just one line. So the text area, again, I'm going to hit the return key just for spacing issues. I'll say class equals form control. And then after that, name equals comments. And how many rows? Well, the rows, I'm going to have 3. And that's what I need to have for the text area. Now the text area opens and closes. So if it didn't open and close for you, which mine didn't, make sure you have an open and close text area in your design. And actually I should put it up right next to it so it's nice and clean and semantic. Now if I save this, now I have a comment section. That's great, but I need some way for them to submit the information. Right now there's no submit button. So the last thing I got to do after that form group, this is a lot of code, I know, but the great part is once you set this, you're done. I'm going to say button type submit. Submit. Geez, submit. There we go. Class, I'm going to do 2 things. BTN and BTN primary, and say submit. What this will do is this is going to turn this button into the style of a button and add the primary color of blue. And there it is. Now if you do want also some space below the submit button, you can also add on the form a margin bottom, but I just kept it for now right here. So it looks pretty good, but if I just run this and I try to submit, it's like, hey, fill this field out. So I will say John, and if I try to fit this piece, it's going to try to work. But what's going to happen is until I actually run this on Netlify, it's not going to work properly. So let's go and upload this onto Netlify. So I'm going to head back to Netlify, which I should have had open beforehand. And I'll log back in. And I'm in that project as well. And production deploys. I'm going to scroll down. And let me take that folder and drag it in. And at first glance, it doesn't appear like anything happened. But what should happen if this is done properly is I'm going to get an email that says, welcome to Forms Level 0. So you're now using Forms on Nostalgic Ptolemy EC5B71. So we can get you started on Forms Level free plan. You can get up to 100 submissions a month and allow you to upload files up to 10 megabits or 10 megabytes per month. I am not using this part, no big deal. And of course, as you start getting forms sent to you, you're going to notice that you're going to get up to 100 per month for free. If you are a larger site, you have to pay for it, but right now it is totally free. Let's go and see if this works. I'm going to minimize that email and let's click and run this website. Contact, and let's see how this works. First name, John. Last name, Smith. Me at, we'll do me.com. That's an Apple website. And we'll say this works. I don't know. And we'll say submit. Hey, thank you. Your form submission has been received. Back to our site. Cool. Well, this is what your user is going to see. But let's take a look and see what we see. So back inside of that Netlify site, if you go across the page, you're going to see something that says Forms. And the Forms says General Form V1. Check it out. Notice that that is the name that we gave above on General Form V1. And here, if I click on it, hey, check it out. This works. I don't know. If I click on this, John Smith, me at me.com, this works. That's great, but if you think about it, I'm not checking this every day. In fact, I almost never check this. So I want the system to email me when I get a response. So what I can do is I can go back out of that forms into overview. And what I can do, let's go to settings and overview. There we go. In settings, we're going to have another area for forms. And in this form section in settings, I know it's not under forms, it's under settings, which anyways, what I'm looking for is I'm looking for the forms notification. And what I can do is I can add a notification either in Slack, a different webhook post, or an email notification. New form submission, I'm going to say is my email address right here. And what it'll do is it'll email you the form into your email box. That's pretty freaking awesome, especially when working on a free site. So once again, I built the form and it can email me, and utilizing the settings and the form, it'll email me notifications when I get a form response to my website. Awesome. We have a website. We have the home page. We'll go to my portfolio. We have an about section, have a portfolio section, and a contact page. The two things I want to finish up with is I want to fix the navigation. I want it where when you go on the contact page, this color stays where you are. So on the contact page, if I scroll up to the contact, what I want to add is the word active. And that's built into Bootstrap. So when I save this page and refresh it, not on the Netlify page, on the desktop version, there we go, contact. I'm going to do the same thing for my portfolio and the about page. So making sure I have it all set perfect. On the portfolio, I'm going to say navlink active, and I have to come back and get the about page pulled up. And now what I want to do, which I'm looking for, and I minimized it, inside the about, I want to say active. And now if I click on portfolio and click on about, and the home page will have nothing, now I have a stronger usability when it comes to navigation. And if you're not loving the default settings of type, I also wanted to show you how you can go into Google Fonts, which I'm going to head to Google Fonts. And I want to bring in a new font. So under Google Fonts, I'm going to find a better looking font. And just so you can see it on the screen that's different, let's use this Grandstander. And the Grandstander looks like this. Oh, it's got different weights too, even cooler. So what I want to do is I'm going to bring this 400 weighted font. Notice how the numbers of 200, 300, 400, 500, 6, 7, 8, and 9 are different weights. We can bring in different styles. So in this design, let's bring in that number 4 and select this style. If you notice it says embed, and I'm going to take the import because that's going to go into our style sheet, and I'm going to copy that import into my custom. And what I want to do is I want to bring the import at the very top of the screen. And from here, this is going to import the font. The next thing I want to do is link the font and say font family Grandstander. So let's say I want to make all my H1s be the same style font. So what I want to do is after, and we'll put it at the very top in this case because it's going to be, well, actually we'll put it below the masthead. There we go. I'm going to put it after content box. I'm going to say all my H1 tags get this font. And now what's going to happen is Notice Welcome to My Portfolio has now changed. You can change any font you want on your website using Google Fonts. This is just an option. I don't recommend that font. It's a little goofy for my portfolio, but you can start to add different fonts, and the great part about it is you can add different weights. So what I can do is if I want this 100 weighted font, notice how it brings in the 100 and the 400 as well. So if I import and come back to the top of my CSS and import the 100 and 400, now what I can do is I can say font weight 100, and what's going to happen is it's going to be a very, very thin weighted font on all of my pages. That's a very contradictory style of font, but you can still use it in your portfolio on all of your pages. The CSS controls everything. And there's one more thing I want to fix up on this project. If I go back to the portfolio, refresh my page, notice how this footer doesn't stay at the bottom of the screen. To me, this is an issue I want to fix. So let's go back in our CSS and do a little tweaking to this design. Inside of my custom CSS at the very top of the screen, I want to write a few lines of code. I want to say body, oops, where am I clicking? Body, and say display flex. I want to write something brand new. And in here, I'm going to say min height, if I could type all of a sudden, 100 VH. Much like we had 60 VH, the body is going to say min height 100, which is going to be the entirety of the screen. And from here, I'm going to say is flex direction column. And what this is going to do is this is going to allow me to push the footer to the bottom of the screen. What I want to do is, oops, did I click on the very bottom? I just did. Let me scroll back up here. I'm going to say class site content. I've been typing that on all of my pages. So what I want to do is on the site content, I'm going to say flex 1. What this is basically going to do is it's going to say make the middle section be as big as it can without affecting the bottom part when it comes to the footer or the header. Note what happened. Body display flex, min height 100 VH, flex direction column, and site content flex 1. What that did is it pushed my footer to the footer. And then when I move my browser up a little bit, it stays like a sticky footer at the bottom of the screen. And this allows me to push the footer, so if I don't have a lot of content yet inside of my portfolio, it still keeps the footer down below. And overall, this is looking really good. So let's actually test this in a mobile framework. I'm using Safari this entire time, but I want to pull up Chrome because Chrome has a great tool. If I can find my browser on a different screen. So what Chrome allows me to do is it allows me to check it on a mobile framework. If I drag this index file over and drop it in, it again looks good, but Chrome has the inspect editor. And if I hit Control key on this screen anywhere in Chrome, I can inspect it. And what's going to happen is it's going to go right into a mobile framework. Well, the iPhone should have a mobile or responsive navigation, but it doesn't. There's something going on that's wrong. And also, if you notice, there's no sticky footer. So there's one thing missing I wanted to show that was kind of hard to show at the beginning, so I kind of kept it towards the end. So what I want to do is, and this requires a little bit of a copy and paste in our project, but in the index.html, we have to add a viewport. And it's kind of hard to see how the viewport works, so I kept it till the very end for this reason. And it's also good to check your projects at any given time in Chrome using this inspect tool. You can get out of inspect by hitting close, goes back here, and clicking Control key and inspect. So what I have to do is I have to add the viewport to this project. So in index, after the title, what I'm going to do is I'm going to write meta name, equals viewport. What this is going to do is it's going to resize my screen for a mobile environment. I'm going to say content equals width equals device width, and then say comma, initial scale equals 1, and then shrink to fit equals no. Hopefully I got that one taken care of, and close it up. What this is going to do is it's going to say make the width of the device equal to the device width. The device width being more mobile. So when I save this and I refresh this, notice how much bigger my project got, and I can scroll down, and if I can show this at the correct size, now you can see that it shows it down here, and also you can always say for the percentages, you can say fit to window, which was about that size. So now I can scroll my project up and down. Now we have to copy and paste that to our different pieces. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to move meta, copy this to the about, come on up. Requires a little bit of work. The portfolio, paste it in, the contact, come on and scroll up to the top, and the portfolio Itutaki. And I believe I hit all of mine. Yep. So once again, I just had to copy and paste that viewport to all the different pages. And now when I refresh the page, when I go to portfolio, portfolio holds. When I go to contact, contact holds. When I go to about holds. So it's really important to add the viewport. And our last step, of course, is to go back to Netlify, and let's head over to Safari and netlify.com. And to log in, and let's upload our finished project. Come on, Netlify, you got this one. Here we go. And production deploys. Let's grab the folder, drag it in, and it's published. And now we know this works on a mobile framework, and we'll test it once more just because I want to make sure it works. So I'll copy and paste. And then what I'll do is I'll say inspect. And sure enough, the site works on a mobile framework using Chrome's inspect editor, and you can see it works on a Pixel 2 or any other responsive mobile framework. Hopefully you have yours working and you have yours also uploaded to Netlify. If you do have it working, throw me a comment. I'd love to hear how successful your portfolio came out with. As always, I'm Hayden Adams with A Designer Who Codes.